No leaks, no rumors, just pure shock live on SmackDown. The look on every fan's face said it all. This was the return nobody saw coming, and it changed everything tonight. The arena was loud, but it was a familiar noise. The champion, Alexa, was in the middle of the ring, her voice dripping with the kind of manufactured arrogance that had defined her entire reign. The championship was held high, a gleaming prop in her speech about how no one was left, how she had cleaned out the entire division. The crowd booed on cue, playing their part in the predictable theater. And then it happened. Not a boom, not an explosion, just a sound. A single, haunting chord from a song nobody had heard in 5 years. The champion stopped talking. The crowd's unified jeer dissolved into a confused, scattered murmur. 15,000 people turned, almost in unison, toward the entrance ramp. In the broadcast truck, the director was screaming into his headset, "Who is that? That's not in the format. Stay on the champ." But the cameraman knew better. He zoomed out, capturing the champion's face as her smug smile faltered, her eyes wide, searching. The lights in the arena went dark, all except for one single, stark white spotlight. It hit the top of the ramp, illuminating a silhouette. The murmur in the crowd died. It was replaced by a complete, terrified and reverent silence. It was the sound of 15,000 people realizing the impossible was happening. For 5 years, she was a memory. A what if? Tonight, she was a reality. She didn't walk. She stalked. The camera followed the back of her head, the crowd parting almost instinctively as she descended the stairs. We didn't need to see her face. We knew the walk. We knew the tattered leather jacket. A fan in the front row, a grown man in his 40s, was openly weeping, his hand covering his mouth. A young woman dropped her replica championship belt, her face frozen in disbelief. The camera finally panned to the ring, to the champion, Alexa. The color had drained from her face. This wasn't part of the script. This was an invasion. This was a ghost walking out of a grave and into her living room. At the announce table, we saw him. Marcus, the voice of the brand, the man who had been her partner, her fiancé before the accident. He was pale, his hands gripping the desk so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked like he'd seen a specter. She didn't acknowledge him. She didn't acknowledge the crowd. She slowly climbed the steps, stepped through the ropes, and stood face to face with the champion. The champion, Alexa, was trembling, a mixture of rage and genuine fear. She held the microphone out, trying to speak, but only a choked sound came out. Serafina didn't say a word. She just looked at Alexa, then slowly, deliberately, turned her gaze to the championship. She pointed, not at the champion, at the title. The show cut to black. The moment the red, on-air light went dark, she turned and walked back through the curtain. The atmosphere in the gorilla position, the area just behind the entrance, is usually one of frantic energy, technicians shouting, and wrestlers catching their breath. Tonight, it was silent. Everyone stopped. The producers, the grips, the writers, and the other superstars who had been waiting for their own segments, they all just stared. This wasn't a surprise just for the fans. This was a secret kept at the very highest level. This was a shock to the entire industry. The head of production, a grizzled veteran who had seen everything, just slowly removed his headset. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just nodded, once, his face a mask of unreadable gravity. He knew he had just produced a moment that would be replayed for decades. There were no welcome back handshakes. There were no celebratory hugs. The other women in the locker room, the ones who had built their careers in her absence, just stepped aside. They parted like the Red Sea. They didn't know if they should be afraid for their spot or in awe of the legend. She wasn't a coworker anymore. She was an event. A walking, breathing moment in history that had just made them all feel secondary. She walked past them all, her boots echoing in the sudden, heavy silence. She knew the hallway by heart. She walked past the catering area, past the trainer's room, and headed for the locker room that had always been hers, the one she had earned. But when she arrived, she stopped. Her name wasn't on the plaque anymore. It was covered in the bright, garish branding of the champion, Alexa. "The Standard," it read. A cruel little reminder that the machine doesn't wait for anyone. That time moves on, and graves are quickly built over. She stood there for a moment, her hand hovering over the handle before she let it drop. It wasn't her room anymore. A young production assistant who looked like he was barely 20 nervously ran up to her, holding a key. Miss Serafina, we have this room for you, down at the end." He led her to a small, sterile, unmarked room, a black steel bench, a mirror with bare bulbs, and a single bottle of water. The isolation was immediate and cold. The adrenaline from the crowd began to fade, replaced by the bone-deep ache of reality. She sat down, the silence of the room deafening. Her phone, which she had left in her bag, vibrated on the bench. She looked at the screen. A single text from her sister. It just said, "Are you sure you're okay?" She hadn't even begun to ask herself that question. The moment SmackDown ended, the digital world simply broke. It wasn't a trending topic. It was the only topic. Every other news story, every celebrity, every political argument simply vanished. The internet, the place where every secret is spoiled, had been kept completely in the dark. That phrase, "no leaks, no rumors," became a banner of victory for the fans. Video clips recorded on shaky phones from inside the arena, capturing that raw, collective gasp, spread faster than the official broadcast feed. You could feel the shock in every pixel. Wrestling journalists and insiders, the people who built their careers on knowing what would happen next, were posting apologies. They were admitting they had been blindsided, that they had missed the biggest story of the last 10 years. The company's official social media team, who were also kept in the dark, scrambled. They posted a single black and white image of her silhouette on the ramp with just 2 words: "She's back." It shattered every engagement record in the company's history. Within an hour, fans who hadn't watched the product in 5 years were logging back into old message boards, dusting off old accounts, all drawn back by the return of the one they thought was gone forever. The entire narrative of Alexa's dominant reign was erased in 10 minutes. The next day, the company called an emergency press conference. The room was not filled with the usual sports bloggers. This time, mainstream media was there. News anchors, sports columnists from major papers, lifestyle magazines. They smelled a story that was bigger than wrestling. They sensed a story about resurrection. Serafina sat at the main table flanked by executives in suits. She wore a simple black turtleneck, her hair pulled back. She looked poised, calm, and impossibly tired. Next to her, Alexa was a storm cloud. She had been forced to attend, and the fact that she was no longer the center of attention was eating her alive. The questions were not about wrestling. "Serafina, why now? After 5 years of total silence, not a single interview, why return?" She would just smile, a small, sad smile. It was time. A reporter from a major network asked, "Alexa, do you feel your championship is now overshadowed?" Alexa snapped. "Overshadowed? I am the standard. She is a relic, a ghost." But the cameras always swung back to Serafina. She was a black hole of charisma, pulling in all the light. She gave them nothing, and in doing so, she gave them everything. She wasn't playing the game. She was in complete control, and the media, the champion, and the company itself had no idea what her next move was. Hours before the next show, in a completely empty arena, she found him. Michael, her first road agent, the man who had produced her debut match, the man who had held the ice pack to her head in the ambulance 5 years ago. He was sitting in the 12th row, just staring at the empty ring, a place that had given them both everything and taken just as much. She sat down 3 seats away from him, leaving a respectful, heavy gap between them. For 5 minutes, neither said a word. They just listened to the hum of the arena lights. They almost forgot you, you know, Michael finally said, his voice raspy. I almost did, too. She just nodded. She knew. This place. It's not the one you left, Sarah, he warned, still not looking at her. It's faster now. Meaner. The business. It chews people up and it doesn't even remember their names. These kids in the back, they don't respect the past. They just want the future. They want your spot. He finally turned, his eyes full of a fatherly, desperate concern. Are you absolutely sure you can do this? I'm not talking about the match. I'm talking about this, the noise, the lies, the politics, that injury. It took your career. Don't let this comeback take what's left of your soul. She looked at the ring, her old prison. I have to, she whispered. It was getting too heavy to carry alone. She found him in the empty catering hall long after the crew had eaten. Marcus. He was just sitting there, stirring a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He looked smaller than he did on commentary. When he heard her footsteps, he flinched, but he didn't look up. You shouldn't have come back, Sarah. His voice was hollow. This was my place now. This was clean. She stood on the other side of the table, the ghost at the feast. I was injured, Marcus. I didn't die. You seem to confuse the two. He finally looked at her, his eyes red. I waited. For a year, I waited. I called. I visited. But you were just gone. You shut everyone out. You shut me out. Life has to go on. Alexa, she was there. She needed me. The betrayal wasn't a grand villainous act. It was simple, human weakness. It was the cowardice of moving on. She needed you, Serafina repeated, the words tasting like poison. And what about me? Did you ever stop to think about what I needed? Or was I just a problem you had to solve? He stood up, slamming his hands on the table. I built a new life. I built this. You can't just walk back in here after 5 years and tear it all down because you're bored. She leaned in, her voice suddenly ice. I didn't come back for you, Marcus. I didn't even come back for the title. I came back for me. The meeting was in the chairman's office. A place of dark wood, polished steel, and intimidating power. She had only been there twice before. The first time, to sign her original contract. The second time, to be told her contract was being terminated duetto her injury. This time, the power was all hers. The ratings from her return were the highest in a decade. The merchandise they had rushed designed sold out in 20 minutes. The chairman's second-in-command, a man in a flawless suit, slid a thick leather-bound folder across the table. It's the biggest contract we have ever offered a returning star, the executive said, his smile wide and artificial. Multi-year, limited schedule, a guaranteed main event at the biggest show of the year. Serafina didn't open it. She just looked at it, then gently pushed it back across the table. No. The executive's smile froze. I'm sorry? I don't want a multi-year deal, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I don't want a limited schedule. I'm not here to be a legend you wheel out for nostalgia. She reached into her own bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper and a pen. She slid it to him. This is what I want. He read it. His face went from confusion to disbelief. This is for one match. One. And then, what? One match, she confirmed. The champion versus me. Winner take all. If I lose, I disappear. I never come back. I sign a non-compete for life. I go. The executive was stunned. You're betting your entire legacy on one night after 5 years? She stood up. I'm not betting. I'm finishing the story. So the stage is set. The world believes it knows the story. It's the fallen queen versus the usurper. It's the bitter ex-fiancée, Serafina, trying to destroy the new life of her replacement, Alexa, and her old love, Marcus. The media spins it as a story of revenge. The company promotes it as a battle for a legacy. Everyone believes she came back to reclaim her throne, to win the championship she never lost. That's the story they are selling. But it's not the truth. The final scene of our story is not in an arena. It's not in a press conference. It's late at night in a small, empty rehabilitation clinic. The lights are off, save for a single fluorescent bulb humming overhead. Serafina is on a physical therapy mat, her face a mask of agony as she pushes her surgically repaired knee, the one that betrayed her 5 years ago. She is pushing past the pain, tears streaming down her face. On a steel bench next to her is her gym bag, and sitting on top of it is a worn, folded letter, the paper soft from being reread. We zoom in. The return address isn't from the company. It's from a children's hospital. The handwriting is a child's crayon. We can only make out one line. Your match was the last one I watched with my mom before she got sick. I wish you had one more. The hook was right. It changed everything. But it didn't change the company. It didn't change the champion. It changed her. She didn't come back for a title or for revenge. She came back to keep a promise.